You had a big day, have you?
Mate, they're all big days. Yeah, I've sort of got things all running into each other. It's a very important thing to be able to say no, but I haven't been very good at it lately. So I wasn't really anticipating going back to work at GWS in the capacity that I am. And I certainly wasn't expecting to get involved with rugby league. So it sort of took 4 days of the week, and I was already pretty much working 6 or 7. And there's not 10 or 11 days in the week. So, but I'm doing my best to defy it.
I remember talking to Dean Huffer, and before he put me in contact with you, and one of the things he said was it was just so impressive to see you open your diary and see every line of nearly every page just organised. And he said, I've never seen so much writing on every page of someone's diary.
It is crazy, but and I've got to have it written down. Like for me, I still use electronic diaries, but if it's got to be in my paper diary. I still like to be able to physically, tangibly touch it.
Yeah,
So
I'm a bit the same. I've never been good with the iPhone diaries. I tried the calendar on the iPad for a while, but my issue was I never had the technique down pat. So I tried to sync it from iPad to iPhone, and something would be on one device and it'd be missing from the other, and I was just missing random appointments that, that I hadn't quite got across to my iPhone. So I'm a little bit old school in that sense too.
No, it can be a bit of a trick, and when you've got, as you just said, an iPad, a home machine. I've got a Mac, I've got the laptop, I've got my phone, and then the other thing that happens is other people come on different platforms. So some people work on Outlook, other people work through Messenger and so on. Yeah, it's easy, I found, to miss things. So I make sure that I've got it in front of me on paper.
Yeah, no, very nice. Quinny, I know you're flat out. So I just does about 40 minutes work for you? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, that'd be fine, mate.
No, awesome.
No, well, I blanked the afternoon off, actually. Not just for you. I had the afternoon free, and I thought I'd get home and do a little bit of work, but I've got plenty of time. And my only other appointment, which is one of the things I like, I've been working at a private school now this is my 6th year, and out of the blue, I got a message this morning from one of the old boys. Would I be free to catch up? And it's going to be tonight. So I catch up with boys from this school that, some of them 6 years ago, they finished university now and in their jobs. And it's a unique program that they've got going. It's at the Scots College, which is the brother school in Melbourne. You've got Scotch up here at Scots, and it's probably one of the best private schools in the country if you go by, school fees, I guess. But and its location is second to none. But I've never heard of it anywhere else. I'm basically come in, I'm not part of the school, I'm not associated with the school in any other way than this role, and I mentor the boys one-on-one in year 12. Every week I'll sit down with them and we talk about anything from how they're going at school to their helping them get their diaries organised, helping them realise targets that they've set for themselves. It might be things outside of school to do with sport. It could be issues they're having at home with their parents, issues with their girlfriend, issues with bullying at school, getting a job, concerns they've got about leaving job, universities, ATARs. It can go anywhere and everywhere. And my job is not to tell them what to do, but to basically make sure they're going in the right direction. And in many respects for these boys, it's the first time they've had a mentor outside of their family, outside of their dad, in my case. And it's been a very powerful role to have, and one that I've loved doing. And probably this is my last year doing it because of what we were talking about earlier. Just can't fit everything in. And that's probably going to come to an end at the end of this year for them, as in their year ends in August. So come August, that'll be the time to say goodbye to that. But it's been quite an interesting role doing that one.
It's so interesting, the different roles or the different facets of the role of being a coach takes on. I was about to ask you how that actually even came about, but I'm going to take a wild guess that it started out with some strength and conditioning or athletics program, and they realised you're a man of many talents, which went a little bit beyond the training.
No. I was actually working at a clinic, a medical clinic up here, and after I'd left the Giants, and I was working in a medical clinic in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and the girl that owned the clinic, her husband he was waiting for his wife, and he could hear me talking to one of the patients, and he thought, we need this guy working with our students. He's like a coach. And then when he got introduced to me and he found out that I was a coach, he said, well, this is what we want. I want a non-educator, but a coach to coach the students that way. And that's how it started about 6 years ago.
Gee, it's very interesting. I was actually going to pick your brain a bit about this today. It was something I had sort of jotted down, just about the different facets of what being a coach is, because I know obviously, well, I was introduced to you, and I think my first point of interest with you was just to hear about your approach to running training and the strength and the balance and the technique and things like that. But I think it took about 46 seconds of our conversation for me to realize there was about 4 other things that I wanted to go into as well, which all turned out to be separate podcast episodes. But how has I actually didn't even realize you were back with the Giants, Quinny. So what's the role you're playing there this year?
Well, I'm an exercise physiologist at the Giants, which is an interesting role. And I don't think there's that specific role in any other club. And look, hats off to the club. It's been a fabulous club to me. When I got sick with encephalitis back in 2014, the club really stood by me, and they created a role for me when I got out of hospital, and probably before I was really in a position to do anything meaningful. But the CEO, Dave Matthews, is still there, and the footy manager, Gubby Allen, who's now with St Kilda, they just structured up this role for me to come back in, and I was the academy director for a few years. And look, I think I had a positive impact in that role. I really did enjoy doing that. But like all those things, it came to an end, and it was time for me to move on. And I thought that was the closure of my AFL chapter, if you like, other than maybe working with an individual here or there. But they have had a new head of performance at the Giants now for a couple of years. His name is Nick Poulos, and I'll meet with Nick, infrequently, 2 or 3 times a year, and we just throw around ideas. And he and I have always got on quite well. Nick's background, he was at Adelaide Pros for several years, but he's probably more known in New South Wales, especially for his role with Rugby Australia, and he's with the Rugby Sevens. But Nick had this idea of coming in, and I could basically work alongside of him, and we could bounce ideas off each other, or he could bounce his ideas off me. And look, at the end of the day, the role is to get the most out of the players and let them perform to their maximum potential. And I think there wouldn't be too many high performance coaches would go and get someone who's been in that industry for more than a decade to come in and work alongside of them and not feel threatened or insecure in their job. And I think that says a lot about Nick Poulos, and I think it says a lot about the Giants as well. So I'm there working alongside Nick to get the most out of each and every player, but in particular in regard to their injuries and in return to play. So when those players come back onto the pitch, they hit the ground running. They'll be good to go. And we find out this weekend's our first game against the Sydney Swans, and that is a genuine derby when it's on here, or if anyone's listening to this from SA and WA, a derby. But it's a genuine thing. There's no love lost between the Giants and the Swans, and so it will be on in just a few days.
Well, Quinny, now I'm going to be honest, I feel a little bit torn because I want things to go well for your sake with the Giants, but as a Carlton supporter, having our first win of the night last night, I'm quietly hoping you keep a few tricks up your sleeve, because I would much rather you be down here with Carlton, but because I know the impact that you have on the athletes that you're working with. But that's interesting. So Nick is looking after the high performance element. Obviously, you've got an insane knowledge on the subject of running. Are you having any input onto the structure of the preseason running and the in-season running?
No. All the structural work I leave that with Nick. That's his job. But I do running work with the players and work on their mechanics, and initially, trying to identify areas where they may be predisposed to, unnecessary injuries just through poor mechanics. But quite often before a skill session, we'll proceed it with running mechanics, or it may be something that we can do in the gym, where very good strength coach there in Brad Newton, and I might float around and give a bit of technical input, or we'll do some transfer work, might be plyometric work, hurdle jumps or hops or whatever, and I'll coach them from a track and field point of view on how to get the most out of them. And look, I've long said that AFL players, they're like it's AFL is like the 11th event in the decathlon. They're like elite athletes. Most of these guys are elite athletes, and if another sport had have called them when they were young men and now young ladies, I'm sure most of them would have been quite successful at the highest level in whatever sport, but they've chosen to go with AFL. So they're highly coachable, extremely athletic, very fit and very strong. For me, it's like a coach's dream.
I wouldn't have thought there'd be too many AFL clubs doing technical work. I played relatively high level. I had a preseason down here with the Box Hill Hawks, which is in the VFL, Quinny. I'm not sure. I'm sure you're probably familiar with the VFL being down here now and then.
Yes.
But
remember, you're forgetting, aren't you? I was with the Bombers for 10 years.
I am forgetting that. I actually, as I started the question, I realised you're a lot more experienced in the world of football down here than even I am. But I had a preseason with Box Hill Hawks after I finished as a middle distance runner back in 2014. They were sort of going through a phase. Mark Blitzars had just been picked up at Geelong, and there was a little bit of a scoping look at athletes from other sports that they were trying to recruit. I'm not sure if it's as strong now as what it was then. I felt like there was a real appreciation for middle distance runners when Blitzars was picked up back in 2014. But one thing that I was interested in was we ran very hard. For Box Hill, I was really surprised at just how hard we trained, because I'd always thrown out a bit of dirt to footballers saying, mate, you want to know how a real athlete trains? Come and train with a distance runner. And then I got down there and never spoke badly about them again, because we were doing some intense running sessions, but there was never any talk or interest in the technique side of running, which I thought was interesting for such a heavily running based sport. There was no coaching, no guidance.
I think a couple of the clubs sort of changed a bit of direction back late 90s, early 2000s. And, talk about the Box Hill Hawks, well, they were quite influenced by Bowden Babachuk, who was with Hawthorn for quite a long time. And Bowden came to them with a track and field background, and he brought that athleticism, if you like, into their preparation. And I was only telling someone the other day about my exposure to AFL. Like I'd never seen a game of AFL. I'd grown up in country New South Wales playing rugby league, and I'd played that for many years and even refereed it and coached a junior team. And it was through coaching the junior team that I fell into coaching runners, because no one was in town to coach the young kids. And I was a reasonable runner, as in a sprinter for a country boy. And so I set up this athletics club, and I had no idea, but our little athletics club was growing into quite a big unit. And we were the fourth biggest club in New South Wales outside of Sydney. And the boss of Little Athletics came knocking on my door to see what we were doing. And I answered the door, and he said, "Oh, I'm here to see your dad." And I said, "Oh." He said, "Yeah, we're here to see John Quinn." I said, "No, that's me." And he goes, "Oh, really?" So I was only 20 at the time, not even. I was probably 19 at the time. And anyway, from that's how I moved to Sydney, and I started working for Little A's. I used to travel over 100,000 Ks every year from every part of New South Wales, from Broken Hill to Bondi, trying to get kids into athletics and movement. And I was coaching at the same time, and it probably just got a bit out of hand. I've never worked a day since, and just been coaching people to move better, regardless of what sport they play, whether it be track and field, or in this case, AFL, rugby league, or tennis or cricket or whatever. But eventually I ended up in Tasmania as a high performance coach there through the Australian Institute of Sport. And I was there for several years, and there were 4 key programs down in Tasmania. There was cycling, rowing, hockey, and track and field. Well, if you were a talented athlete outside of that, looking for something to assist your program, with all respect to those sports, which I love, you're not going to get much help from rowing, cycling, or hockey. So they would be sending them to the track and field guy. So I was getting all these people for, speed development and even agility and explosive jumping power, and helping with their strength programs, whatever. And there were so many AFL kids coming, and they're sort of saying, "Oh, go to the draft camp." I didn't even know what the draft camp was. I said, "Oh, fantastic, have a great time." So off they'd go to that. And little did I know they were getting drafted, and my name kept coming up. And that's how I came to go to Essendon. And I kept thinking, I must watch a game before it starts. In these days, if this is 98, it was going to be on a VHS tape. I just didn't have the time between moving from Tasmania, getting my family settled there, and getting a house to live in, and learning the new job. I never did look at a game. So the very first game I ever saw was against Carlton at the MCG, and I was the high performance manager. I didn't know how many points they got, which way they went, or anything. Pathetic, really, and quite surreal. But what I'm trying to say, I'm never short of a word, you probably gathered. What I'm trying to say is I looked at AFL players through the eyes of an athletics coach. And what I saw and still do, these are high-performance athletes at that level that are akin to somewhere between a 400 and an 800-metre runner. And then you got your outliers that are more like 1,500-metre runners. But generally speaking, it's 400 and 800-metre runners. And when I first went to the Bombers, I started coaching the boys in that light, that we did a lot of repeat efforts, a lot of lactic work, and moved away from the long, slow distance running that had been fairly prevalent up until that time. And it was quite successful. And, you know, I still didn't know too much about it, but the Bombers won the premiership a couple of years later. And there's so many factors, including a fabulous team. But I got some of that reflected credit. And it was a fabulous time at the Bombers. But I was there for 10 years with Essendon before it came time to move on.
Yeah, that's one thing I was really interested in. And I think after our initial conversation, even further entrenched, I think some of the training programs because I'm writing a lot of training programs for mostly community level football clubs. And I share that same passion as you of being a younger guy. I was just caught up with a number of clubs who are like, all right, you want to go out and get fit. Just even for me, when I was 14, 15, they'd say, go for an 8K run, just nice and slow. And it was all about just building that aerobic base. But then you'd get out to a football field and, you know, you'd have to sprint for 50 meters 6 times and I was exhausted. So it's that progressive overload kind of training, or that lactate threshold training is something I'm fascinated by. But like, do you separate the groups, like within a training group like the Giants? I know you said you're not responsible for the actual running work right now, but like, are you getting the midfielders in one group and sort of less key running plays in another group to do slightly different running training sessions, or how do you organize that structure? Because even at the Box Hill Hawks, when I was there, I was interested to know that regardless of what position you played, we're all doing 8 by K. And I thought this doesn't really correspond so well to the 6'4", 450 kilo fullback. But for me, it was quite easy to understand.
Oh, look, it's very easy if you've got one or two athletes to give them a bespoke program, something that's just for them. It certainly gets much harder when you've got, say, 40 or 50 players on your list and you're trying to create an individualised program for them. And if I'm really honest with you, it's a nonsense to suggest that you're giving a player an individualised program. You will give them a program that's got individuality within it, meaning, yes, you may break them into their areas, their event, their position-specific area. So, for example, the midfield, they might need more repeat effort running than, say, your full forward might need in a game of football. But then you look at the individual, and I don't think this matters whether you're talking about AFL or you're talking about soccer or you're talking about cricket or we're talking about a middle distance runner or a sprinter. You look at the individual and you say, well, what are you doing that's good and effective in getting you the result that you're currently getting? And what are the things that you're doing that can actually help make you better? What are you lacking? Is it that you need better upper body strength? Is it that you need better shoulder mobility? Is it you need better hip mobility? Is it you need more explosivity? Do you need more explosive speed? Do you need more max velocity work? Whatever it is. And then you start to individualise the program according to that. So you have your general program, but then you have your individualised needs and requirements spinning off that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It is difficult. I even find that a lot of the clubs, even individuals, will contact me and say, hey, what's the key focus? And I'm like, well, we really need to have a few more emails before I can try and offer any specific advice, because it is difficult just trying to figure out whether it's more of an aerobic thing or a speed endurance thing. But one of the things I was interested in picking your brain about, Quinny, and you sort of mentioned a couple of times that it doesn't matter whether you're a footballer or a runner, there's certain elements of the way that you move that need to be focused on. But from a distance running like a more running based sport, just like track and field, a 400, 800 meter runner, are there many things that you think runners are doing better than footballers or vice versa? Because I know one of the things that I was, to go back to Box Hill Hawks, one of the things I was impressed with first of all, was their facilities to be able to offer ice baths and massage. And I thought the recovery side of the training was really well looked after. I thought they offered a lot of sort of guidance and help when it came to that. But the actual structure of the running was maybe a little bit of a downfall. Whereas in the running world, I always felt like the coaches I had were very good with technique work and understanding of what needed to be developed in order to improve my performance. And they sort of complemented each other quite nicely. But I felt like through my experience, they were mutually exclusive. Like, are there any things in your eyes that one can glean from the other?
Oh, I think it comes down to the individual, but one of the great strengths of an individual sport, we can be talking track and field or swimming, for example, is that it's easy to measure it, and there's nowhere to hide. And that's one of the big things in an individual sport like that. The spotlight is always on you, even if it's just you. You know whether you've run that time or you haven't. And if you go a little bit easier, it's evident because the stopwatch doesn't lie to you. In football, it's not so easy to measure. And if you're just having a bit of an easy day, you can hide yourself in there. It's getting harder because now with GPS and it's in real time, it's getting harder to do that. But still, when you've got numbers, you can meld into the pack a little bit more. So I think the sheer measurement factor, it's the honesty of a sport, the individual sport, and it's the self-honesty that drives you. And it's a lonely existence in sports, team sports. You've got other people around you that you have your down times and your up times, and you get to share that with others. When you go out and you've trained your butt off, and for whatever reason, you don't run to the expected level that you've had, there's nowhere to hide and there's no hole big enough to go into. And no matter what the coach says, the feeling in your gut, just you can't move past that. And it's very rare to have that level of despair that sometimes accompanies individuality in sport. It's rare to get that in a game like AFL. In fact, the only time I ever recall experiencing that was when the Bombers played Carlton and they beat us by 1 point in the preliminary final in '99. And I'm sure that's bringing a smile to many Carlton fans of that era. It certainly didn't bring a smile to mine, and I can imagine what it was like for the players. But generally speaking, I think it's that. I think it's just the honesty of individual sport versus team sport, and finding those people in team sport who are honest to self.
No, it's a really good point. This time of the season, so we're recording this, what is it now? Late March. So some teams have just started in the AFL, just started round one last night, the last couple of nights. And that transition from pre-season to the main season of AFL is something I'm really interested in, because obviously in a lot of community level clubs, there's a huge focus on the running element of the game in the pre-season. And then I guess rightly so, when there's a game every week and they're quite physical, both to the clashes that you're having and also just the demands on your body from a running perspective, it can be a little bit difficult to navigate or plan the running element of your training throughout the season. And I'm always fascinated to know, like, obviously one really big hit out a week is it's a great step for your fitness level. But when it comes to finals, I often wonder how much the form of a player has changed from the start of the season to the end. Like, obviously your match fitness has improved. But I was curious to know how the training at a club like Giants does change from now, or especially maybe even a couple of months ago when you might have been in the midst of like a whole heap of super heavy running, to maintaining that fitness throughout the season, maintaining injuries, maintaining the running fitness, maintaining the recovery. Is there a certain structure that you try and use for a club like that? Or is it, to steal the word that's maybe a little bit broadly used, individualized as much as possible?
Going back into the 80s, there was a big move within Western countries for track and field, especially in terms of periodization. And we've been delving into that for a long time. And the Eastern Europeans, particularly the Soviets, they've been doing a lot of that stuff, even back in the 50s. And we talked in those days about tapering and freshening, but in terms of periodization, which is manipulating training loads and volumes and recoveries to get a maximum result, it was only really given a scientific twist, if you like, through once we started understanding works of people like Judah Bomper and Matt Vayev and guys like that, that's been common now in track since the 80s, even before. When you talk about that in football, not so much. I think we've sort of delved in it of freshening players up and so on. However, as we're getting more data in with GPS, and as I said, the real time, you can manipulate the loads of every individual. You know exactly how much work they've done, how much high intensity running they've done, how much slower running they've done, and how many impacts and so on. So there is an element of that periodisation becoming more prevalent in AFL, but I still think it's a long, long way off the rigidity that you have in a sport like track. And I think it takes an awful lot of experience, even doing it for an individual, let alone for a whole team. So at the moment, for me, it's fanciful to be thinking that you could do that in a team sport. It's certainly above my skill set. But it does move in that way where you have your volume first and, you know, there's always a thread of the intensity through it. But as you get closer to the games themselves, then it becomes more intense. One of the big things I think I would bring into that, into this discussion would be, we used to think that it was chunked. So you just had long, slow distance, then, you know, shorter distances, and then intervals, and then explosive speed, like this beautiful triangle, which looked great on paper when you give me a presentation. But in reality, it doesn't work that way. And I was only describing to a person a couple of days ago in regard to periodisation in sport, that it's really like, imagine you've got a beautiful rug, and the rug is red, white and blue, but it's predominantly red at one end. That would be, the red is all the fast stuff, and that's the end of your season when everything's happening. It doesn't mean at the beginning it's not red, white and blue. It just means that it's more blue and white than red. And so just your focus on those areas changes. That's what it's like, in my opinion, for an athlete, whether it's on the track or in a game like football, that it's your ability to blend the colours. You're the artist as the coach. It's your ability to blend the colours and what's the preference in those to bring about the maximum result where you want to have most of your impact at that end of the rug or that end of the season or that particular competition. There is no substitute for competition, be that on the track or be that for players. And that's why, you know, we mucked around with pre-season cups and all that sort of thing. But even in these early rounds, I'd expect you'll still see players with fatigue because of the intensity lift in the game, getting cramps and that type of thing. But they'll soon adapt to that. It takes around about 6 weeks to adapt to a stimulus. So everything's got to work in for that. And in that, most clubs would have, over the last probably 4 to 6 weeks, have been dropping the volume but lifting the intensity as they get ready for round one. But they'll hit the ground running, and then they'll come into that first 6 weeks. And it's usually after that, everything settles. Then you'll find out how effective the preparation training that you've put in those long, hot summer months for football, how effective it's been. After about round 6 or 8, the fitness starts to show.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm having flashbacks to a couple of earlier rounds in my career, just those calves starting to tighten up towards the end of that third quarter. But we've mentioned sort of the speed side, the conditioning side, the adjusting to that game day competition. But one thing a lot of the people in my membership ask is about the agility work. And I'm curious to pick your brain around this, because I know in a lot of the drills that you're doing, there's, I guess, natural agility and direction change that are built into that just by default. But is that something that when these guys are out on the track, are they doing agility specific drills, or is that something that's more built in or blended into a lot of the other work that's actually just taking place naturally in a game like footy?
No, we do specific agility work as well, and teach them how to do that. And that even goes right back into your gym work, making sure that they've got the ability to balance. We call it proprioception. Proprioception is just a way of making people sound smarter than what they really are. It just means knowing where you are in time and space, and it's about balance. So if you think you're standing on one foot, that's pretty easy. If you close your eyes, then you start to shake a bit. That's your body working out where you are in time and space. That's a proprioception around your ankle. If you've rolled your ankle ever, you'll find that you lose your proprioceptive ability. If you've put it in a plaster cast, for example, for 6 or 8 weeks, it's your proprioceptive ability that's an issue. And so we've got to build that back in. Well, we do a lot of preparatory work, not just for footballers, but for all sports, to make sure that they've got things like that proprioceptive balance, explosivity and landing, strength all in place. So it starts in the gym and then you move it off into the other areas. Like you would see sometimes players standing on balance boards and things called duradiscs that are moving. That's why, trying to get them stability, which down the chain may prevent things like an ACL. If the ankle can withstand excessive movement, then it won't move up the chain to the knee. So you could prevent a significant injury. So that's why they spend so much time on it.
Yeah, I noticed. I wish that would have been great to know back when I was playing, because I would hate to tell you how many times, I couldn't tell you actually how many times I've rolled my right ankle, and as a result it's sort of become quite floppy. It's a little bit loose. Like I can sit on the couch at a wrong angle and it can sort of get stuck in a wrong place. And I've sort of dabbled very loosely, maybe to my own what do you say, like it's been a bit of a curse in the progression of its improvement. But that proprioception, there was one exercise I used to do where I assume this is proprioception, where I'd stand on the foot and you would almost touch the different points of a clock. So the physio would go, all right, I want you to touch 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and then just try. You could feel the ankle joint strengthening up. It was but it was really unnatural, because despite the amount of training, agility work that I might have done, that was something which is quite foreign. So, well, is that just an opportunity for you to, first of all, just to get to a bit of an idea with the role that joint plays, as well as strengthening it before you make more intense direction changes?
Yes, that's right. But it should underpin it anyway. And I have, for my track athletes, we do a program at the end of every session where I get them to warm down with their shoes off, and we warm down in the long jump pit in the sand, obviously. And that's to strengthen what we call their foot intrinsics. And they do lots of balance work and movement work to strengthen up their feet. I mean, shoes are so over-engineered these days that sometimes your muscles aren't doing the work they were actually designed to do. So I get them to strengthen their feet in a long jump pit to do that. And for players, as often as we can, we're down at the beach. For my part, one of the reasons we're going to the beach is a couple, but it's also to get them moving and walking in the sand. And when I was structuring pre-season programs, we would do, much to the players' horror, I'd have them on the beach doing sand dunes and sand sprints and everything. They just saw it as another form of torture, and I guess it was. But it was also a way of getting their intrinsics very strong. And I think it's an area that's neglected for athletes. At the end of the day, running, speed, whether you're a sprinter, a distance runner, a footballer, basketball, whatever it is, your speed is only determined by two factors. One is the length of your stride, and one is the rate at which you take that stride. Now, the rate is probably more important in a sport like AFL or netball or basketball. But having said that, for a runner, it's still important. If you have got poor proprioception or poor ankle stability, that means that your contact time is going to be increased. That means the longer your contact time's increased, the longer you take to take the next stride, the slower you are. So an easy way to get yourself running faster, in my opinion, is to strengthen ankle and knee and hip. And I'm talking now as an exercise physiologist in a clinical setting. Significant number of injuries I see coming into me from the running community come about through poor glute control, poor hip strength or posterior chain, low back, bum, hamstrings, but they're invariably not very good through their knees and through their ankles. And I think it's also exacerbated that as young kids, we're often told, run with pointed toes, run on your toes. And what that does is increase your contact time. You don't actually run on your toes, you run it with a low heel carriage. I'm not suggesting you run on your heels, but you run with a low heel carriage. But the stiffer the ankle joint, the better the less your contact time, the faster you'll run. So I spend a lot of time teaching my athletes how to move better. Now, I see behind you, there's a picture of a girl skipping. I think that's one of the best methods in which to get that explosivity going within your ankle. And if someone's watching or listening to this and you're thinking, oh, that sort of makes sense, I'll challenge you. Get a skipping rope and skip with that rope as fast as you can for 10 seconds. And now try to do the same thing while pointing your toes downwards so that you've got high heels and low toes. And I'll tell you what, you'll be lucky if you can keep skipping, and you'll certainly slow down the rate at which you can skip. Now, apply that sort of thinking to the position of the ankle when you're running and you're about to have an epiphany.
Yeah, beautiful. How many times a week? Like, I know you said that when you're doing a track session with your crew, you'll get them to do that after each session. Is that something you're doing 3 times, 4 times a week? Could you do it daily? I'm just thinking, because there's a variety of athletes that listen to this podcast, from soccer players to runners to footballers, as you can probably tell through this conversation. But depending on the level of the athlete dictates how often it is that they're training. So I was just curious to know, for someone listening who might be training for, AFL, how many times a week would you be encouraging this proprioception training?
There's a thing called training monotony. So if you're just doing it all the day for the sake of doing it, you'll soon get very bored with it. I think if you're talking about muscular, so I made the comment that I think a lot of players are very weak through their low back and glutes. I think you can do that every day, at least every other day, a type of hip control routine. And if someone's listening to this and they think, well, what exactly is that? What would I do? If you can take the time to email me, I will send it to you. I won't charge you. I'll send you what I recommend that you should do for a basic hip control routine. However, when we're talking about things like proprioception, there's an element of the nervous system in there. It's a neural component to that. And I think if you do that too much, you actually lose the effectiveness, and it can actually go the other way. It's like trying to do speed every single day. And in essence, you should probably do your real explosivity stuff only probably when you're fresh, well, one point, but also probably only 48 to 72 hours would be preferred. So when you're doing things like that, stuff I'm talking about in the pits and things like that, I'd only do that every second to third day to get maximum bang for buck.
Yeah, it's funny we're talking about that right now, because I live down in Point Lonsdale, an hour and a half out of Melbourne, and we live across the road from the beach. And yesterday I thought, I'll go for a walk. The sun was out. I'll go for a walk along the beach, and the tide was well and truly in. So naturally I had my shoes off being on the beach, but I was walking in the soft sand. And I reckon I must have walked 4 or 5K in the soft sand. And this morning I could tell as I was walking that my plantar fascia was getting a nice little workout. And yes. I'm quite regularly in bare feet, but not in that particular surface. And even this morning I woke up a little bit and I thought, oh my gosh, I can really feel that. It's like a post-gym workout day where my plantar fascia had a little bit of a shock. And I took a mental note yesterday as I was walking that this is probably an exercise I need to do more of, just to, and even not even just my plantar fascias, but I could feel it was just using different muscles, because I was quite tempted to go down and just try and walk through the water so I could have a nice, easy, relaxing walk, which it was supposed to be. But as an alternative, I was forced to be up there, and I could just feel my hips moving a little bit, my knees adjusting, my plantars were a little bit more sore. It was tapping into muscles and joints that I don't think it had a workout for quite some time.
No. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm a big fan of that. And training on sand, I like it a lot. And it's ironic, isn't it? Because I'm doing this having this role at the Greater Western Sydney Giants. And if you actually think about it, we're the club that's furthest from any coast in Australia. All the other clubs are right on a beach, literally. We're stuck out in Western Sydney holding our ground.
So you just got to make do with the long jump pitch, you reckon?
Oh, we've got to venture into the Swans territory and go to Bondi or wherever it's 2 hours, or go up to the Olympic Park athletic track and get them in the long jump pits. No, it's all good.
No, awesome, Quinny. Well, hey, as we said, I know you're a flat out man. You got plenty on. You've made time for us, and as always, super grateful that you did, especially on such short notice. But Quinny, great to touch base with you. I always appreciate the insight, the wisdom, and the good humour. But I might even send you an email when we hang up, because I'll be really interested to see a couple of those exercises you were mentioning, and I'll make sure I put your email in the show notes for everyone listening who's interested in contacting you and getting a copy of those exercises as well.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, mate. And as I say, if anyone has any questions, just email away, and I'll try to answer every email that comes across my desk.
Yeah, and just for anyone who's wondering, you've got a pretty good reputation. I don't think there's ever been a text message I've sent that hasn't been responded to. So, Quinny, I'll leave you to it. Have a great weekend, and look forward to catching up with you again really soon.
All right. Good luck to you, Tyson. Thanks very much for the chat.
Catch you later. See you, everybody.
Bye.